I'm going to talk to you about succeeding in India and providing you some practical advice on how to enter the Indian market and build up a successful story there. And that will be through a combination and variety of approaches. In today's presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about us and who we are and what we do, where are the opportunities. I'm going to talk about some of the common myths and misconceptions that we hear from people and we see from companies as they come into the Indian market. I'm going to talk about the realities of those myths and misconceptions and about the right approach to take to market. The thought process of how to enter India is an important consideration, and I'll be touching on ways that people need to really think about how they do engage with India and partnerships on the ground and routes to market. And also about HR matters. Anyone that's going into India successfully will ultimately need people on the ground supporting them in the long term. And how do you recruit the right people and maintain their loyalty and their goodwill and their efficiency? And I'm going to touch on just some of the setup costs. There are quite a lot of myths about how much it costs to set up in India. I'm going to throw some figures out just to give you a guide based on a number of the clients that we support. And then, as Martin says, we're going to have a question and answer session which will be open to the panel, and that can include questions about banking, questions about the market entry setup, and anything else that does come to mind. So I've been in India for 20 years now, pretty much half of my life I've been doing business up there. Sannam S4 is the third business that I founded. The previous one was an IT firm which expanded pretty internationally. I opened 11 offices around the world and 25 plus distributors. And everywhere I went, as I opened these new offices, I had the same trouble. I had to find an accountant, a recruitment company, an HR advisory firm to help me with salaries, someone to do market research, a lawyer, then I had to find a serviced office. And I found that as I was travelling around at a great rate, I hardly had any time to actually spend with clients. And that for me was a real frustration. So when I managed to exit the business in 2006, I looked at, I looked at new opportunities, particularly with a reference to India, and I felt that all of the companies that were going to come from the United Kingdom out to India were going to go through the same thing. Stitching together service providers in one part of the world is one thing, but stitching service providers together in India is a wholly different thing altogether, because they're not very used to working together. I live in Delhi. Our firm has offices in Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai and Pune. And we cover pretty much the length and breadth of India's great borders. Sannam S4 was established in 2008, and the aim was to address the challenges that I had in my previous business, which were to help people right from the early stages of them scoping the market, identifying opportunities, finding them credible distributors, understanding the scale and scope of the market, and actually presenting opportunities on a plate for them. Very, very difficult to do from afar, and so we get down to the kind of nitty-gritty of where business actually exists and how to go about doing it. We then help people recruit staff, we then help them manage those staff locally, we house them in a set of serviced offices that we manage across the country, and then we build up their strategies in India to enable them to ultimately be successful. In the last 2 years we've launched 75 British businesses successfully in India, and a number of other businesses from around the world, from America and Australia, for example. And so, we have 1 or 2 new businesses every week coming to us that we're helping get set up there. So for us, it's very much bread and butter. Martin mentioned the alliance that we have with Sannam S4, and it's an important alliance for us and for BDO, because we recognised last year that we fulfil a large part of a client's journey into India. And at the same time, BDO recognised that they fulfil a role for clients like yourselves, the tax, the audit, and the compliance aspects. But to go into India, you need a complete solution. You need a single window approach, otherwise have this creep into a range of service providers. So we formed the alliance with the view of providing clients like yourselves a relationship that you can access through one point and can be extended through a whole service range in India. Arvinder, who heads up the India Advisory Group, has a dedicated team that just looks after the Indian market. They have great knowledge in tax, in distribution agreements, transfer pricing, all of the good information that you'll need from the UK, and then we work with them on the ground to deliver that successfully in India. One of the comments that we hear a lot from people, or complaints, is, oh, it's so difficult to move money in and out of the country. That's not necessarily the case. It just seems to be complicated. So one of the things that we've developed as part of this alliance is to work very closely with HSBC, who have a very strong presence here, as you know, and in India. And that, by collaborating between the three of us, we're able to move money in and out of the country effectively, and we're able to provide clients a complete solution to enable them to succeed. Hopefully you can see this from the back. This is just a standard picture of an Indian street. Nothing special about it at all. But as I leave you to look at that slide, I'm going to highlight a couple of economic indicators. We try and keep these workshops to be fairly practical because we know that you can access Indian information, statistics about the Indian economy on the internet. There are a lot of other events that talk about India as being a large economy and 1.3 billion people. But there are just some specifics that I'd like to talk about. Yes, India is a growth economy. It's growing at about 5.5%, and depending on who you believe, the politicians or the economists, and they're probably both wrong, India will continue to grow at between 6 and 8% over the next 2 to 3 years. But there are some really important statistics and facts that I think you should know. One is that India is not an emerging economy. It is a re-emerging economy. For 46 of the last 50 centuries, India has been the biggest economy in the world. It's only the fact that we've been born when we've been born, and we study the history that we study, and we're British, and we live in a market that has dominated the economic superpower table for the last century or two, that we think that these countries are emerging in the East. It's not correct. India is simply reasserting itself at the top of the economic superpower league from where it has been for 46 of the last 50 centuries. One of the other very important considerations is where India sits in the East vis-à-vis China. A lot of people say to me, how do you compare India and China? It's frankly, two very different markets, both with large populations. China has had a one-child policy, as many of you will know, since the 70s, which has meant that it has a strong ageing population. And most ageing populations around the world go into economic decline. Look at Japan, for example, look at Britain. Classic case studies of where they do not have the economic youth to fuel the growth of the country going forward. A statistic that I throw out at this point, which makes everyone raise their eyebrows in disbelief, and then they start scribbling notes and go back to their laptops and Google to see whether I'm talking complete nonsense or not, is that half of the entire world's population under 25 live in India. So for every African child, every Chinese child, every Brazilian, every American, every European, there is another Indian. So if you think about the economic growth potential of 500 million young people coming into a consumer and working age, think of what impact that has on the world and on the Indian economy. No economy can successfully globalize without a young population, and China had that in its early days. But India has got that potential consumer and workforce population coming in at an historic level. And that is something to really consider. And that brings me, ladies and gentlemen, onto this slide. Imagine there are 500 million people, half of the entire world's young consumer population, walking through this street. Sometimes it feels like that in Delhi, frankly. What do you see? You see a paint shop, a lot of those, a lot of people doing home improvements these days in India. You see a shop selling everything from sweets to milk to gulab jamun, an Indian favourite roadside sweet, to air conditioning units, clothing, chemists. Just an average Indian street. What does that mean to us in Britain? Let me show you. These companies are companies that we've worked with in the last 2 years and who have successfully entered India and have a direct relevance to this very small high street picture. This up here is an AC pump. Last year we launched a small company from East Sussex who manufacture air conditioning pump units into India. They're now doing very well. Young population. We look after the offices and run the offices of 2 of Glasgow's higher education institutions, Strathclyde, Glasgow Caledonian. All of their students come out of our office. A lot of their partnership work is done by us there. 5 weeks ago we launched 32 colleges, FE colleges from the United Kingdom into India at once. They're there to benefit from the skills training opportunity. How do you skill 500 million people up? We have medical equipment suppliers. We have milkshake franchises. We have people that are supplying vitamins, motorbike chains, branding companies. This is just in this one picture. Each of these companies will be generating revenue. This particular company, pigment manufacturer in Leeds, they attended a very similar event that we ran 18 months ago in Leeds, actually. And tomorrow we'll be running the same event in Leeds, and they will be talking at that event. And they'll be talking about their journey. They were distributing, or trying to distribute, from afar into the Indian market. They had a range of distributors, they went over there every quarter, and they had a few sales. But nothing was really progressing, yet they felt there was a huge opportunity. We had a talk to them, we sat them down, we presented them a few opportunities and solutions to address the market more successfully. I was with them about 3 weeks ago. They were over during the Prime Minister's visit, David Cameron's visit to India. And on the day that I was with them, they got a significant order, which they told me secured 3 jobs in their factory in the northwest of England. That, for me, is what it's all about for British exporters and manufacturers and people who are looking to engage in India.